Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Game Studios, which today is Pete and Terry's at Bridgestone Arena. The Predators are in action tonight, hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. Puck drop at 7 o'clock, and all of your pregame coverage starting right here on 102.5 and 106.3. The game right at 6 p.m. We are streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, will join us in 1 hour. We'll get his thoughts on what he saw from Will Levis, the Tennessee Titans as a whole, against the Carolina Panthers over the weekend. All of the reports about the Tennessee Titans that have come out over the weekend. Of course, the Greg Bedard report, the Diana Rossini reports. We'll chat with Tim Hasselbeck in 1 hour. D-Mase and Willy will join us shortly. Willy is at morning skate. D-Mase is probably in the car somewhere. So if you're listening, D-Mase, hey, how you doing? Can't wait to see you soon. So Junie's filling in. Junie, how you doing?
Doing good. Busy weekend this past week. I had my son's first birthday and Thanksgiving all at once. So trying to play
Happy birthday to Lucas.
I know, right? He just turned 1. So it was very, very exciting week. But this past weekend of football was started super slow with the Thanksgiving games. I mean, all of them were duds, but felt like we had a pretty good Sunday, and Titans got a win after 3 weeks, so it was good to see. But still, a lot of drama going around the organization.
A lot of drama in this organization. College football weekend filled with drama. We'll chat with Mitch Light, who covers college football for The Athletic, at 1 o'clock. But I mentioned the Greg Bedard report, Junie, and that's where I want to start. So Greg Bedard of the Boston Sports Journal, longtime NFL reporter, longtime New England Patriots reporter, started his own outlet, the Boston Sports Journal, and he came out with an article, a long, lengthy article about the New England Patriots and the future, and one portion of that article was about checking in on Mike Vrabel. Well, of course, this is not the first that we've heard of Mike Vrabel ties to New England. Ben Volen of the Boston Globe wrote an article about a month or so ago saying that Robert Kraft's home run hire would be Mike Vrabel. All of the rumors and the gossip coming out when Mike Vrabel spent the bye week in New England when he was inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. So this piece from Greg Bedard is yet another chapter in the book of the New England Patriots making a very public and obvious push for Mike Vrabel, very publicly flirting with Mike Vrabel. But one portion of his article, he writes, many believe that Vrabel was put in the position of being a strong head coach and wanted the hiring of Ran Carthon as general manager. That is incorrect. That was a shotgun marriage by ownership. NFL sources believe the league had a heavy hand in owner Amy Adams-Strunk hiring Ran Carthon, a top minority candidate. Vrabel and Carthon had no previous relationship, and it's believed that they don't have much of one now. There have been issues with Carthon's job performance even back to his 49ers days. Now, when I read the tidbit about the relationship, I thought, well, that's interesting, because that's not the first that we've necessarily heard of that. Let's go back to the conflicting reports when Diana Rossini came out and said, we are not trading Derrick Henry. And then an Ian Rappaport report said anything is on the table. Go back to the Ian Rappaport report of Will Levis starting in that game, when that was obviously not something that the coaching staff wanted to be leaked. So it's not crazy out of left field that maybe there were some disagreements, maybe, some, I don't want to say a fractured relationship because I don't think that's necessarily fair, but the relationship was potentially in question. This wasn't completely out of left field. What was completely out of left field, though, Junie, was the questions about Ran Carthon's job performance. That, I never heard anything of. I think that everything that I've heard, that was talked about behind closed doors, privately, everything publicly, was that Ran Carthon did everything the right way. He came up through the ranks through the NFL, was an NFL player, then started at the bottom, worked his way to the top, that he had nothing but utmost respect from everyone that he had worked with the Falcons and the Rams and the 49ers. So I'm thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, where did this come from? What sort of validity is there to this? How is this the first that we have heard of this? Willy D-Mase and I were talking about this yesterday, and we said we were really looking forward to Greg Bedard going on with Jared and hearing more of specifics, potentially, from Greg Bedard sources of the questioning of Ran Carthon's job performance. Again, Greg Bedard was on with Jared Stillman yesterday. Jared asked him about, hey, what's up with that line about Ran Carthon's job performance? What have you heard about that? This was Greg Bedard yesterday.
Well, I'm not going to get into specifics because I don't know the facts. I'm just relating, first, like why Vrabel might not think the Titans is an advantageous position for him. And, from what I've been told, and like you, I don't know Rand Carthon at all. I mean, from what I know about him is, he came up in the right way through the NFL and working his way through. He worked for a great organization, the 49ers. I know him. I don't know him at all. I know him to be from talking to people, certainly, very personable and the kind of guy who gets along with everybody and things like that. But like, as far as, Rand's job performance, I mean, I asked people like, well, how come, why wouldn't that work? And, that's the feedback that I got back. I don't know him at all. I'm not going to get into specifics because it's not like I'm reporting a story on the Titans and, making allegations, but, there are things around the scout community, not anything major. I would say that it's mostly minor, but that some people take issue with, and I don't know if that has. I don't know whether it has anything to do with his relationship with Mike Vrabel. I mean, I think that's sort of a minor thing when you're talking about a head coach, whether he wants to stay in a certain place or he sees the potential for a job opening in a place that he might want to work that he's talked fondly of. It's more of like, do I see myself, is this a position where I want to be aligned with this person just overall in terms of our vision for building a franchise, building a team? Do we see things the right way or do we see things the same way? Is this the type of guy who's going to get me the type of players that I want, or is he going to get the type of players that he wants? And, I think those are more of the major decisions that would go into, any sort of decision for Vrabel to say that, maybe he would want to work someplace else.
So it's a lot of words that didn't say a lot. That really was a majority of the interview. And that's not on Jared. It was really on Greg Bedard saying a lot of things without saying a lot. Junie, I don't know how you felt about that, but that response I thought was complete, total, and utter bullcrap.
It seems like he kind of ran with a game of telephone. Like, it's like, oh, I heard from this person that heard from this person that heard from this person. And it didn't seem like he was getting his information directly from a source close to Rand Carthon. So I don't think he was really expecting to kind of get called out in that way or really have to kind of explain himself. I think, with a guy of his pedigree, he was more or less thinking that people were going to give him the benefit of the doubt, which, to his credit, a lot of us, when we saw who it was and where it was coming from, I mean, initially we did. And I think that kind of turned the heads of some things. But, this morning, it's kind of a shame that he did do that because I don't think that that's fair to Rand Carthon.
It's completely unfair to Rand Carthon.
And so I saw some tweets from an account, Sharm Sports, this morning, and it was basically saying that a lot of former, players from the San Francisco 49ers. I'm looking at George Kittle. I'm looking at Trent Williams, Hufanga, the all-star safety that they have, all spoke glowingly about Rand Carthon and talking about how he's a stand-up guy, he has great character, he does things the right way, and that the 49ers organization wouldn't be where they are without him. And so with all of that, I just felt like this was really bad on Greg Bedard to kind of put that out there and to not really kind of give Rand Carthon the benefit of the doubt of going to somebody who's actually close to the situation instead of just writing about hearsay and basically going with gossip. And that's what I don't appreciate from somebody of his pedigree.
It's honestly, slandering Rand Carthon, saying that he got hired because he was a minority candidate and he had issues with his job performance. That is a massive accusation and incredibly unfair, and he has absolutely nothing to back it up. Look, Greg Bedard is an incredibly respected, well-respected journalist with a lot of sources, and he has more journalistic integrity in one finger than I have in my entire body. But I can even look at that and say that was total bull crap to run with that story. D-Mase is here. We're breaking down the Greg Bedard report, what he wrote about Rand Carthon, and then again, of course, how Greg Bedard responded to Jared's question about some concrete examples where he heard about this with Rand Carthon? Your thoughts, D-Mase?
Oh, man, in the words of Mike Tyson, it was ludicrous. It's just ludicrous. I mean, again, to me, Junie, you said it right. It's gossip. That's basically what it sounds like. It sounds like when your friend comes to you and say, you know, such and such, you know, they get upset. Yeah, girl, such and such did this, and this person told me this about such and such, and then you say, well, what did they actually do? Well, I don't know, but this is what such and such told me. I wasn't. It's like, dude, the way you answered that question showed me that you had no idea what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Or you talk with one person. You went to that one person that gave you a tidbit of information and didn't vet it whether it was the right information or not. You just went with it. And what I don't understand is, if this story was a Patriot story, which you say it was, why do you conveniently slide, Rand Carthon's name in there and slander the name? Wording is everything. He's a journalist. He understands it. Wording is everything. And you put that in there as if you had talked with a few people, multiple people, that gave you instances or situations or examples of what he did wrong as a scout. You went and threw that in there. For what reason? I don't know. If this was a Patriot story, why throw Rand Carthon's name in there? You basically slandered the man. Rand has all right to sue your ass if he wants to.
You basically accused Rand Carthon of only getting the job because he
you
was a minority
accuse him
candidate.
of getting the job because he's a black man. That's one thing that you did. And then you accused him of not being worthy of the job. Like, people have questions. People probably had questions with Mike Vrabel that he didn't coach long enough. He didn't go through the ranks long enough, to become a head coach. But that never came out. You didn't put that in your article, but you chose to conveniently slide Rand Carthon's name in the article. This article could have been done without Rand Carthon's name being inserted in it. That's what I'm upset about. Listen, I wasn't a journalist major. But my first experience with this guy, I don't respect him. Mm-hmm. Basically, that's how it is. Your first impression is sometimes the lasting impression. So you always want to give somebody that first impression, like that good impression when you go to an interview or meet somebody you're interested in. You want to give them like your best. Mm-hmm. Well, my first involvement with this guy is not my best. Mm-hmm. It's not his best. If you insert a individual's name into an article that you really didn't have to, and then you're sort of slandering the guy and accusing that he only got the job because he's a black man, basically. Like, dude, Rand Carthon should sue your ass because you're slandering his name, basically. You are, and you had no reason to do that. Rand hasn't been on the job long enough for you to say, well, he's not capable of doing his job. For anybody, including me, if I can't sit here and definitely say that Rand's not the guy for the job. He hasn't been on the job long enough. Now, we can give examples. Okay, we give Dillard. I give Dillard. But I will give Tajay Spears. I will give the quarterback. I will give Hubbard. He went and got Hubbard, and Hubbard's been nice on the offensive line. He went and got Arden Key, Al-Shair. Those guys have been productive in this defense. One guy more than the other. Sean Bunting, he's productive in this defense. Guys that you had a hand in going out and get. Guys that you had a hand in drafting. Some of them have worked out well, and some of them haven't. That's all GMs around the league, whether you are a minority or not. You're going to hit on some, and you're going to miss on some. I just don't understand why, after it hadn't even been a full year, how can we then give a true assessment of what he's doing on the job? That's the part that I am irritated about. Like, someone outside of this area comes in and basically falsify, things that he's saying. It's like, dude, you can't say that unless you got some hard, concrete evidence. And then when you were asked, you kind of fluffed and went around it. Like, Dude, that's not cool.
And I do think that Greg Bedard has sources because he's been,
I don't want to hear that.
he's been in this league long enough.
Listen, I understand he's been in
But you
this.
don't run with every source.
Exactly. Like, you got to, if you're going to put that in there.
Yeah.
Because, again, what did he say? He said the stories about is a Patriot story. It's not a Titan story. Well, if it's not a Titan story, why do you conveniently insert that in there?
That's the problem, is he said, I'm not reporting anything on the Titans. Well, when you bring something up like that, question the
aptitude of him being able to do his job.
questioning the hire and questioning his job performance, you're making it a Tennessee Titans story.
Exactly.
You don't put that in there and then all of a sudden just roll past it like it's no big deal and walk it back like, look, it was minor. Well, if you say that what you've heard from scouts, well, it was just minor. The accusation that you are putting on Rand Carthon is not minor. And one thing that Joe Rexrode brought up, because he is a journalist, so when it comes to journalistic decisions, I defer to Joe Rexrode. He brought up a very fair point that, Joe Rexrode, he writes for The Athletic. If he wrote something like that, he has editors that looks through it and says, where'd you get this? This is a really big thing that you're saying. What are your sources? What are some evidence? How can you back that up? Because if you don't have anything concrete, you don't feel comfortable putting anything concrete, you don't want to reveal any of your sources, then take it out. That's what an editor is there for. Greg Bedard writes for his own platform. I don't know if he has editors or not, but if you write for your own platform, it's probably likely there is a possibility that he doesn't have editors that are there to say, whoa, 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 you're saying something really big there, and you're putting it out there, and then rolling on with the rest of your story with no evidence. There's no checks and balances if there is no editor. So I do believe that Greg Bedard has sources, but you don't roll with every source. It might just be one thing that one scout said in passing, and then it, like you said, Junie, it was a game of telephone and it got misconstrued. But that's a really major thing to put out there. And there's a lot of people that probably read that and didn't hear Greg Bedard and isn't listening to us today and thinks, well, Rand Carthon isn't very good at his job. That's a really dangerous thing. And that's what
I'm getting to. It's like, dude, listen, I don't want you to sit here and name your source. I don't, because everybody has sources, and for to question everybody and say, well, you got to give a source, it's just not going to happen.
You're not going to reveal your sources.
If you reveal your sources, then you don't get the information that you need later on. So I'm not asking him to reveal his sources, but when Jared asked the question like directly, and you kind of fluff around it and kind of it's like, dude, why? Well, okay, if that is indeed the case, just give me one example, of people not trusting you in the scouting world, in the scouting department in San Fran. Give me one. Just say, you could say, well, they drafted, Trey Lance, and he was spearheading the go get Trey Lance and trade all these. Give me examples like that, or another example. The examples that I've gotten is, hey, listen, this dude, he knows his job. Listen, the guy knows what he's doing. He's helped facilitate bringing guys in, evaluating guys, and look because he has been a part of this, look what we have been able to do as an organization in San Fran. Not just San Fran, the LA Rams and the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, by the way, didn't all three of those teams go to the Super Bowl at one point? And he was a part of all three of those organizations. So if you're going to say something like that, when it's not a story about Rand Carthon and the Tennessee Titans, please give examples of, okay, this, you don't have to give your sources, but give examples. There are a lot of journalists out there that give examples or they tell a story, but they don't give up their sources. So when I'm reading it, I can say, okay, we need to look into these, He didn't give no examples, and when he was asked it was mine. Well, you should have put minor in your story when talking about Rand Carthon. If you want to say it's minor now, then put minor in your story.
It was it felt like a walk back to me. It felt like
major
it was just minor. It's just what I heard from some scouts. One thing that I really took issue with that he said was, I don't know all the facts. Dude,
Well, if you don't know all the facts,
if
don't
you
go with the
don't know all
story.
the facts, then
Don't
you
go
can't
with the
put that
story.
in your story.
And I think if he would have just kind of paraphrased it in the sense of this is kind of what I'm hearing Mike Vrabel is thinking. I don't necessarily have any sources towards Rand Carthon. This is just the perspective of how Mike Vrabel is feeling in the sources that he has, because I believe that he has sources that he can get information of Mike Vrabel and how he's feeling about his current situation. That's fine in my opinion. But to kind of sit here and question Rand Carthon and what he's done in his career as a front office member, I think that is where he crossed the line. And to D-Mace's point, I mean, to sit here and kind of allude that he only got the job because the NFL was kind of pushing for minority candidates, and we've known what they've been trying to do with that, I just think is where this thing has gone wrong. And to Rand Carthon's credit, I know a lot of people have kind of come out against him. I mean, you got to look at what he's been working with. I mean, so far this year, and I look at this draft class, there have been positives. And again, like you can question like drafting Skoronski and putting him at guard and using that as the 11th pick, but he's still been your highest rated offensive lineman throughout the season. And so, and then you talk about the free agents with Arden Key and Al Shire. Like, what was the big thing with the Titans this offseason? They didn't have a lot of money to work with. They were really having to go towards the discount shelf. And I mean, I think we can't really necessarily judge Rand Carthon on what he's done as Titans general manager until a couple of years to kind of see the ebbs and flows. They're going to have a ton of money to work with this offseason, and I don't think it's fair to kind of judge what he's done with a discounted budget.
I am coming from that world. I know what words mean in that world when you label them on certain, on people, period. Just a period.
Yeah.
Whether he's a bust or this or that, those words mean a lot. They're heavy. So that's why I am passionate about it. It's like, dude, don't put something on that man's name that you really don't know about. Like, you really don't have all the information. Like, you can't go in depth if you need to. Don't put something on that man's name, okay? That's one thing I'm a stickler about. If they didn't do it, if it didn't happen, don't speculate that it did happen. Don't put something on somebody's name that heavy, especially in the sports world, in talking about a GM, a minority GM. You throw something like that heavy on him, that goes around the league. It got back to us. You know what I'm saying? I know it's a Titan. He says it's not a Titan story, but you made it a Titan story.
He made it a Titan story.
So how many other people read that outside of the walls of Tennessee? How many other people have read that and thought, even in Boston, oh man, he's a bad GM. He only got hired because he was a minority. It's like, dude, you can't do that, especially not in the sporting world, especially when you're dealing with, individuals at that level, the level of decision making, GMs, owners, head coach. If you don't have like concrete information that you can back up if you need to, then don't put it out.
I don't know if Rand Carthon is going to be a good general manager.
I don't either.
I do not know. I think the first draft looks pretty promising. I didn't agree with all of the free agent acquisitions, but his job performance is completely independent of what the color of his skin is and whatever Greg Bedard said in that article. Because it's honestly, frankly, incredibly disrespectful to Rand Carthon that Greg Bedard would put that out there with zero concrete evidence to back it up. But that is how we're starting today. Greg Bedard, what he wrote about Rand Carthon, he and Mike Vrabel's relationship, the backpedaling that he did yesterday on Stillman and Company. And now what I want to get to is, where do we go from here? Because we've already had questions about that relationship. We've already had questions about the leadership of this football team. Where do we go from here? We'll get into that coming up next. And, of course, your thoughts on this. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We are brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
well known is it? Is it one person? I'm not going to ask you for your sources or anything like that, but is it one person that you heard about the Vrabel Carthon thing, or is it almost pretty well known up there after his trip to Foxborough that this relationship with the coach and the GM isn't going very well?
Well, I don't know if it was as it came as a result of any conversations that happened in Foxborough when he was here. I don't know that. I will say that I probably. One of my questions about Vrabel is, and the biggest thing when you're talking about, and I've been covering the league for 20 years, the biggest thing is what's the relationship like between the GM and the head coach, especially when they don't have a background together, or at least, outwardly they don't. And I was told they had, no background. Those kind of shotgun marriages in my experience covering the league, just do not work. They hardly ever work. Like, you really need to either pick a strong head coach who hand selects his GM, or you need a strong GM who is in charge of hiring the coach. And, I probably heard from, 3 or 4 different people when I asked about Vrabel about, like, well, what's the relationship like with Vrabel and Ran, and they, universally said, like, there isn't, much of a relationship. There wasn't much of a background. I'm sure the stress of the season hasn't helped. Now, I don't know if it's a bad relationship at this point, but those kind of shotgun marriages and where things are going with this team, sort of gets people to the head coach and the general manager sort of start to retreat to their own camps, and that's when they start thinking about other possibilities.
There you go. That was Greg Bedard of the Boston Sports Journal on Stillman & Company yesterday. Caroline, Willy, and D-Mase were live out here at Pete and Terry's Tavern at Bridgestone Arena. The Predators in action tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Pete Weber's 2000 Predators game. So congratulations to Pete. Congratulations to Pete. So I want to get into what Greg Bedard said there about the relationship between Mike Vrabel and Ran Carthon. And look, that interview, a whole bunch of nothing in that interview, and that's not on Jared.
Nothing burger. No, it's not on Jared. He didn't write the article.
He asked the questions.
Yeah, he just asked the question.
They can only be answered in one way. But he in that article that Greg put out in the Boston Sports Journal, he questions the relationship between Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel. And look, it's no mystery that Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel didn't have a relationship before. But now my question is, what is it like now? And how have they been navigating it through a difficult season? Because when you're winning, it's probably really easy to get along. It's really difficult probably for anyone to get along whenever things are hard in any sort of relationship. Business relationships, coach-GM relationship is no different than that. Another thing that I have to keep in mind, D-Mase, is where Greg Bedard's sources are from. Now, I don't need him to reveal his sources, nor is he going to. I would probably guess, just given Greg Bedard's background, that a lot of this sourcing is from the New England Patriots. And what do we know about the New England Patriots? What Ben Volen reported in the Boston Globe about a month or so ago, that Mike Vrabel would be their home run hire. I have to wonder, now I'm not accusing anybody of lying, but I do have to wonder how much of this is being pushed out by the New England Patriots to create Vrabel Titans propaganda?
Man, you just wonder.
It wouldn't be the first time in history that there are things being put out, maybe the media being used
for a narrative
for an ulterior motive.
Yeah, an ulterior motive, or for a narrative to be, put out there. Listen, we don't. From my experience, I'm only speaking from my experience. I don't know everybody else's experience. So I'm talking from an experience of a player that was, considered one of those guys, one of those top tier guys at both organizations. Losing causes you not to like somebody sometimes in a particular moment. It's not that you don't like them as a person. you just don't like what's going on, whether it be, for moments there where the defense held up their end of the bargain here, and the offense was always lacking, at times lacking behind before, Heimerdinger got here and we kind of took off. They had a certain way how they did things offensively, and for the most part, it kind of went in with the times, and we were good at it, running the football with Eddie George and throwing it to Frank Wycheck. But when the league starts to change a little bit and your defense feel as if they're doing all the work, eventually they're going to get irritated and upset. They may love me, but they're irritated. Like, y'all can't score no damn points. They may love the offense coordinator, but they're irritated with the offense. Like, why can't y'all? We're doing our job. Why can't you? This is the way locker rooms operate. Not to say that there's any fracturing of the locker room, but listen, things are not going right. Y'all got to pick up y'all end of the bargain. Y'all got to hold y'all water. We're doing our part. Y'all got to do your part now. Guys get irritated. So I'm sure in this whole, winning only, 4 games in the last 16 or 18 games. 18 games. There's going to be some friction. There's going to be some, hey, listen, we're doing what we're supposed, y'all got to hold up y'all end of the bargain. And it's probably that way amongst coaches, amongst, management. Like, come on, let's get this going. I know we're working in tandem, but still some things need to change. When you're working with someone, everything is not, we're not going to agree all the time. Mm-hmm. But as long as we have a common goal, and what's that goal at the end? I tell you, I can work with anybody, mm-hmm. as long as we have the same vision moving forward, as long as the end goal is the same. We may not like each other, we may not have a history with each other, but as long as we're working toward that one goal, then I'm fine. Unless you get disrespectful and stuff like that, then okay.
There's a mutual
respect. Yeah. It's just, as long as we have a mutual respect for things, everything is not going to be perfect. I'm not going to always agree with you. You're not going to always agree, especially when things are not going the way we both want them to go. And I'm sure that's Rand and Vrabel, or Vrabel and the offensive coordinator, or offensive coordinator. It's with all of them. Like, listen, there's some things that y'all got to do, or we got to do. What is it? I don't like the way things. So there's going to be a button of the heads. But if we have a common goal at the end, and that is to win a Super Bowl, build a team that's a winning team with a winning organization, then I'm cool. And I'm sure with Vrabel and Rand, there probably has been some back and forth. Like, yeah, it just happens. That's a part of business. But for the most part, both of them want to do the same thing, and that is to build up this organization and make this organization a winning one.
And it has made me wonder how much of the sourcing in that article, in that Greg Bedard article, was through, conversations with people that got misconstrued and misinterpreted, and that's the sourcing that he is getting. Because I'm not saying this happened, but I'm saying that it's not out of the realm of possibility that when Mike Vrabel was in Foxborough, he may have been, loose lips a little bit. I've done it so many times before. Mm-hmm. You're out with your friends and you're thinking, gosh, like this one person that I work with, my significant other, they're driving me crazy. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you hate them. No. It just means sometimes you just need to get things out. You need to vent a little bit. That maybe something like that happened with Mike Vrabel. Man, I'm so frustrated with this team. Man, I'm so frustrated. Rand and I just can't agree on this one thing. Again, not saying it happened, but saying it's probably not out of the realm of possibility that Mike Vrabel said something in passing when he was in Boston, and if that was the case, Greg Bedard's not going to say it. That could have gotten misinterpreted, passed along a game of telephone, where that then grew into Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon don't respect each other and they don't have much of a relationship.
Well, if that, I am going to tend to I want to believe, and I want to sort of err on the side of Vrabel wouldn't do that. That's the side I want to err on. I want to believe that he knows damn well that if he goes up to New England during this moment where it's about him and about being inducted into their Ring of Honor, that he then trashes or even give a hint, especially to a reporter or anybody that can.
And I don't think
exactly. It's like, I don't think he would do that. Now, I could be completely wrong. And if that ever was come by, I would get on this radio and say, you know what? I was wrong. I didn't think Vrabel would do that, but God darn it, he did it, okay? Excuse me, people. God darn it, he did it, okay? But I just don't think he's that type of, knowing he's been in this business for a very long time. Unless this is who he is, then okay. Like if he's one of these guys that like to, backbite people and talk about people when they're not around, then I can't fool with that. That doesn't sit on me well. But I don't believe Vrabel to be that type of guy. So I don't think he went up to New England under no circumstance and started to, sort of had vomit out of mouth, about the Tennessee Titans and about Rand Carthon. Because just as you're telling people about that, and they may agree with you, there's somebody that's listening that may be friends with Rand or Amy or somebody in that building. They're thinking like, why are you saying that? Like, seriously?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I hear you.
You want to go to New England and play around in Foxborough?
And I'm going to dial back, and I'm going to be like, hey, listen, this is what's going on down here. So to me, I know he's very careful about what he says. Just listen to his interviews, on Mike Vrabel. He's careful and calculated at what he says. Majority of the time. Now, there are sometimes he may get a little upset, but majority of the times, especially when it comes to he and Rand's relationship, he is very careful because you don't want to give any illusion that this thing is not working. It could be working. It could not be working. I don't know.
It might not be
Yeah,
working.
I don't know.
They might not have a good relationship.
Exactly, but
this team is bad. Anything's on the table.
I don't think he would give that illusion that it's going bad.
Scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about that relationship?
Scale of 1 to 10, 10 meaning that I'm worried the
10
most.
is panic button, 1 is zero concern at all.
I'm maybe a 1 or 2 only because it didn't go the traditional way of you hiring your GM and then through the owner, team president, or whoever else, then y'all hire y'all coach. This was sort of out of sequence. You hired your coach. Well, you hired your GM, you hired your coach. You fire your GM, and then you have to hire another GM. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, a 0 would mean Rand was in place. He helped hire Vrabel, so we know that's
a traditional partnership.
Absolutely. I say a 1 or 2 because in these situations, sometimes when he's not the necessary, when it didn't go in that order, sometimes there can be, some I'm going to say dysfunction, but there can be some agreements that has the potential to sort of, become something bigger than what it should have been. So I would say a 1 or 2, but that to me is like, okay, if they keep losing this, they keep losing the remainder of the season, going to next season, and things are not working well, then okay.
I mean, you could be the greatest general manager and coach duo in history. If you're losing football games, that's the only thing that matters.
Exactly.
Which is, I think about like a 4 or 5. For one reason is it's not a traditional partnership. That normally it's the general manager brings in their guy. We saw that probably with Mike Mularkey. He was the coach. John Robinson came in. It is speculated that John Robinson didn't want Mike Mularkey, so he moved on from Mike Mularkey and brought Mike Vrabel in. That it's difficult whenever you have a pairing of 2 different backgrounds. Sometimes we have seen that not work in the past. The second thing being, I don't know who's in charge. Like I don't know who has the power. We know Mike Vrabel has more say in personnel. I believe that Mike Vrabel has final say, but where does Rand Carthon's job end and Mike Vrabel's job begin? Whenever there's blurring of the lines of duties and roles and final say, I always think that's a recipe, not for disaster, but maybe for a little bit of miscommunication, maybe for a little bit of, not dysfunction, but not functioning at the highest level. The third thing is this team's losing. This team scored 17 points against the worst team in the National Football League, and then that team fired their coach the next day. You're not a good football team. You don't have good enough talent on that roster. That falls on both the shoulders of Rand Carthon and Mike Vrabel. I think it might get better. I hope it gets better. I hope the drafting gets better in the future. I hope that this free agency period, they bring in some players that can help this football team win football games, because frankly, there's a whole lot of free agency acquisitions on this team that isn't helping the team win football games. So I'm at like a 4 or 5 because the team's not good.
And listen, I understand why you would be at a 4 or 5, and I'm not going to sit here and dispute that. To me, it hasn't. I don't think it's gotten to that point yet, or if it will ever get to that point where these two guys are, just can't stand working with each other because things are not going right.
If it gets to that point, that is on
then I
Amy
think
Adams.
Yeah, that's on Amy. Everything has to go.
Everything
you have to
goes.
start. You have to start new. But I am not going to base my, final thoughts on Rand Carthon, and it hadn't even been a year yet.
And I'm not going to base my thoughts on Rand Carthon on a report from Greg Bedard that he can't even give concrete examples of some of the accusations that he's put in there. Let's get your thoughts on this coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025-1063, The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're live out here at Pete and Terry's Tavern at Bridgestone Arena. The Predators in action tonight, hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it is Pete Weber's 2000th Predators broadcast, so congratulations to Pete Weber. Willy joins the party. Willy, how we doing?
I'm doing well.
Hey,
It's good,
hey,
good
Willie,
to talk to you guys.
How many is this for you?
Have
You know
been
what?
counting?
I honestly, I thought about that. And by the way, huge milestone for Pete. And we were talking to Pete earlier. 2,000 Predators games.
Oh.
But then that doesn't even count
Other stuff.
2,500 Buffalo Bisons, AAA baseball games, the Buffalo Sabres, the LA Kings, all the other ones. So he's way up there. He is way up there. But I've never kept track. Like I guess I could go back and count them. And you know, for the television broadcast, we don't do all 82 because
Right.
the national TV has a few of them. So it might be a little tricky math. And then do you count the preseason games? Do you not count the preseason? You know.
Sure.
You got to count.
Why not? Let's count
Exactly.
too.
Okay, we'll count those.
Yeah.
You can't half do your job in preseason. You got to
Yeah.
be able to do it,
Yeah.
you know?
It's a game.
Exactly.
You're working.
Game's a game.
Yeah, I don't know how many I have. It's
you-
not close
you
to
need to look that
2,000
up.
though. Yeah, I'll
We'll
look
get our
that up.
calculators out, and we'll throw Willy a 2000th Predators broadcast party.
Got a long way to
Whenever
go.
that day comes. But Willy, we were just discussing Greg Bedard when he was on with Jared yesterday. Jared asked him about, hey, you put in your article that there were questions about Rand Carthon's job performance in San Francisco. What did you hear about that? And Greg Bedard, basically in about a 2.5-minute long answer, kind of sidestepped it, didn't provide any concrete examples, and said, well, it was minor. It was nothing major. Your reaction to what we heard from Greg Bedard on Jared's show yesterday?
I was disappointed with Bedard. It is kind of what I suspected. I think really the premise of the article, which he kept coming back to, was he just looks at Mike Vrabel as a guy that has leverage, and it all stems from there. Like the whole article is, could you create a theory, a plausible way where Mike Vrabel could be considered by the Patriots? And to get there, he had to create a narrative, which I thought was very unfair to Rand Carthon, and I thought it was unsatisfactory. Let's put it that way. How he really
That's a
didn't
nice way to
realize
say it,
that.
That's a
Willie.
really nice-
Yeah,
I
that's
said
a really
bullcrap.
nice way to say it, Willie.
You know, he wasn't he didn't realize, I don't think, how he made Rand Carthon look in that with really no basis. If you're going to do that, then come out and say, yeah, this was a strong message sent that Rand Carthon didn't know what he was talking about. But there was nothing like that. It's like, well, there was just a couple little things, nothing big. Well,
Nothing
then don't
major.
write that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You wrote it, and you made the guy look like
He was
he
incompetent.
that he was not qualified to get a job, that Mike Vrabel was handed a bag of you-know-what as a general manager. And that fits his narrative, but that creates a narrative here that I think makes Rand Carthon look incompetent, which I thought was wrong. That was just
completely
wrong.
unfair.
He was a qualified person. You know, we talked to Tehran about this yesterday. I don't like that when he kept saying this is not a Titan story. Well, yeah,
You
but
made it a Titan
people
story.
outside of New England read your stuff. Obviously,
Exactly.
that's why we're asking you to come on.
And when he
So-
said, I don't have the facts. If you don't have the facts, then you can't write it. That is
No.
journalism 101.
Right.
It was a bad journalistic decision on his part, and in turn, it now makes Rand Carthon look bad, and that's unfair.
Yes, because other people read that too. That makes the rounds around the league, and it makes it sound like he's got some sort of inside scoop that nobody else has. And not a lot of people around the league come to Nashville very often. They probably don't know Rand Carthon very well, and so you get labeled, and that's completely unfair. I do hope that Mike Vrabel at some point does set the record straight and say, wait, I want to address one thing. We talked about it yesterday. It didn't come up. Nobody tossed him the question so he could do something with it. He might just need to take it on his own on Wednesday and say, I want to address one thing. Because I think it's important to stand up for the people you work with.
Absolutely.
With
I
that
would
kind
agree.
of stuff.
Let's get into some of your thoughts on it before we chat with Tim Hasselbeck in just about 5 minutes. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHunted.com. One texter texts in says, it's a shame for this station and someone who blatantly hates Rand Carthon to even interview this idiot and bring more life to this crap. who blatantly hates Rand Carthon? I don't think anyone at this station
No, he
blatantly
was saying
hates Rand
he was
Carthon.
saying the guy. He sort of is he saying the guy that wrote the story blatantly hates him, or Jared? Because that's what he's saying. Jared, because Jared got the interview with the guy. I don't think Jared. I don't know if the guy Bedard hates Rand Carthon. I'm very careful about words. I don't think he hates him. I don't know why he chose to put that in there, because if you don't dislike him, now you've thrown that in there. Now it sort of maybe shapes the perception with others that just read your story, just read your stuff.
Yeah.
They don't read anybody else, or if they do, there's nothing being said about Rand Carthon anywhere else. But all of a sudden now, this article from I'm throwing up quotations, people, quotations, a reputable journalist, people are going to, because of the years you've been in this business, people are going to look at your words sometime as gospel. And they're gonna start, well, Rand doesn't know what he's doing. He only got hired because of this. You have to be careful when you do stuff like that. But I don't think Jared hates Rand. I hope he doesn't.
I don't think he hates Rand.
I think sometimes, that he jumps hastily sometimes.
He does that with everybody.
Exactly, but instead of he sees legitimate things that have happened within this organization over the years, and he always points to the Dillon rating.
Andre Dillard.
Andre Dillard, and he has every right to point to that. And it's like, damn, y'all, the one position y'all had to get right, for whatever reason, y'all didn't get right. But also, when you do that, you also got to talk about the other stuff, the draft picks that seem to be they're contributing to this team. They're not at their best, but they're playing good football. They're rookies. They're playing good football at times. So you just hope that they grow from that. You don't talk about, Al-Shair, his ability to come in and be a tackling machine for this team. It hasn't always been perfect, but for the most part, he's done his job. You look at Bunting, he's playing okay. He's not the greatest DB out there, but he's not the worst. That secondary is just bad in general. But he holds his own at times. So there's Hubbard. People look at Hubbard, the offensive line's bad. Well, Hubbard he's probably, other than Peter Skoronski, he's probably been the best guy on that offensive line.
His hits and his misses.
Exactly. So you have your hits, you have your misses. But let's go through all the GMs across the NFL. I guarantee you they probably look all just like Rand Carthon. Meaning you have your hits, then you have your misses.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about it. He's referencing back to Rand Carthon as a scout. Now, there's never been a scout in any sport that is right every time. We're talking about predicting the future of young players. You've always to climb the ladder, you have to have a certain level of success. But nobody's going to be perfect, so I don't know what he kept referring to this vague. Well, in the scouting community, yeah, there were some things. What? Tell me one. Tell me one thing.
Yeah, you don't have
nothing.
to reveal the source, but what is one thing that you have heard?
And he could not get anything specific at all. So again, just implying that he wasn't qualified somehow or he wasn't Vrabel's guy, it made no sense.
And that's why we're talking about it, to the texter's point about.
Sometimes articles like that do lead to things where we have people. That's why you have the person on.
Yeah.
Right? I think the texter is kind of asking, why would you have him on? Well, you want to find out.
You
want to
pull out
to
anything
this?
else. Yeah,
Sometimes
something
you
else.
do get insight that is useful. Like when I read the article first, I was like, does he have something here? Let's talk to him. Because I'll be honest, you guys know, I was saying let's try to have him on. Jared was able to contact him first and got him on. So I was like, great. This guy needs to speak about that article. And then when you hear him, he had nothing. Nothing.
And Jared,
at all.
And Jared was trying to pull stuff out of him.
Yeah, he gave him a chance.
Like, come on, dude, give me something else.
Tell me what are you saying
And you
here?
couldn't give him nothing else.
Yeah.
And that's why we're talking about it. That's why you have him on, is to kind of expose something like that, to either open up another story or realize, look, what you said has no merit. We'll chat with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, coming up next. We'll get his thoughts on this, what he saw from Will Levis and the Titans on Sunday. Tim Hasselbeck will join us coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game and the Game Nashville app. We're live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Game Studios, which today is Pete and Terry's at Bridgestone Arena. The Predators in action tonight. Puck drop at 7 o'clock. All of the pregame coverage will start right here on 102.5 The Game, starting at 6 p.m. Joining us now is ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, always appreciate our weekly chats with you. Frank Reich was fired just 11 games in, the morning after the Titans beat the Panthers. What does that say about the Titans?
I don't know that we can really connect the two. Obviously, they're the final straw, but I really think this was a bigger picture of, hey, we get 11 games in, what kind of progress have we seen? And it doesn't appear like there's been a ton of progress. C.J. Stroud has played extremely well, and I think that, you have an owner who also has a history of being impatient. So I think if you look at all of those things, that's really what it's about, not necessarily, hey, here's a bad team that you just lost to, I can't handle it anymore, we're done. So, that's my read into it. I think had it been, the Raiders who beat them, I think you'd have seen a similar reaction.
ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck is with us. Tim, we were watching the Titans-Panthers game on Sunday. Adam Amin said, if you're watching this game, you must really love football. And that is kind of how it felt sometimes throughout the game. A little bit of a snooze fest. But I was watching Will Levis with a very keen eye, as I think a lot of Titans fans are. And Will Levis' debut as a Titan was that Atlanta game, 4 touchdowns, an electric day. And I think as we grow and see more and more of a sample size of Will Levis, maybe you're starting to see a few more of those rookie mistakes come through, which is, of course, what we expected. But what was your evaluation of Will Levis' performance against the Panthers?
Yeah, I think that the more somebody plays, especially if you play one game and it goes great, the expectation is like, hey, look, that's what happened to Brady. He got in, he played great, and then he kind of continued to play great. And certainly, had some off games, but it happens, where you basically felt good about it almost all the time. Brock Purdy, I think it's been, pretty much a similar situation. I think Dak Prescott kind of had a similar rise where he got an opportunity, he played well, and there really weren't these significant growing pains. But that typically doesn't happen because, if you look around at Kirk Cousins or, like other quarterbacks that they get their opportunity, there typically is a moment where, he is a young player, he's going to learn. So I don't feel like I've seen anything. You asked my evaluation. I don't feel like I've seen anything to go, that was all fake. All the good stuff was fake. I haven't seen that. I think what I feel like I've seen is a young player who's done some really good things, who's still a young player, misses some things, but ultimately, I think that it's been more good than bad, and especially when you consider, everything around him. So, my evaluation is, I think it's looking smarter and smarter, to be honest, that Mike Vrabel made the move when he did.
We'll talk with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. Now, Tim, when evaluating, let's just say these 4 quarterbacks, Will Levis, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, and I know Richardson is injured, but while he was playing, is it more about the actual player, or is it more about who the player is surrounded by? Not necessarily players, but coaching staff, because we saw what happened in Jacksonville. And then we see once they bring in another coach how well Trevor looks. Now, he still needs to get a lot better, but he doesn't look anything like the quarterback we saw under Urban Meyer. I can possibly say the same thing about Bryce Young. He may look a lot different now that Frank Reich is not there. Mm-hmm. So how much, if you had to, sort of divvy out this pie, how much of it is about the coaching staff?
Okay, let me answer it this way. I think there are very few players who elevate the players around them, but also make the coaches better. I think there's a small portion of players that are able to do that. Okay? So I think that, like, to give you an example, like, I think Peyton Manning, no matter where he was going to make the players around him better, and I think he was even going to make the coaches around him better. So I think there are some guys that, like, he's a bigger piece of the pie. Okay? Then I think that there is, this next group of guys that are starter caliber players that can play really good football. And it is a much more dependent position for them than it is for Peyton Manning. And so for those guys, I would say that it is, maybe 50% the coaching staff and 50% the talent of the players around you. So I think that matters. Then I think there's like a segment below those guys that could maybe play as well as the group, above that I just described, where they need a little bit better players, and they need a little bit better coaching, and that helps them play better than they actually are. So, but let me kind of give you this in terms of some of the guys that you asked me about. I don't think that I don't think that Bryce is surrounded by really good players, but I think he's got good coaches. But it hasn't gone well. You compare that to CJ. I would say this. We really don't know a ton about the coaches. They're kind of new in some of their roles. And they've done a very good job. I think that when you look at their talent around them, like Tank Dell might turn out to be, one of the 5 best receivers in the game. Who knows? But look at what's going on with everybody else around him. Like, they're all playing better. Like, C.J. Stroud might be one of those players, not saying it's Peyton Manning, but he might be one of those players that's like, nope, you know what? He's making everyone around him better. Like, I think that might actually be going on in Houston.
Yeah, I can see that being the case with C.J. Stroud, and it's just unfortunate, even in Will Levis's case, that he comes in with a offensive line that isn't good. So you can see glimpses of it, but you can't really see what the potential he has, because in front of him, like you said, sometimes in certain situations, the people around you affect how good you are, even though we may see the talent. But if there's nobody around you, then it may hamper you from, growing as much as you need to grow in that particular year.
Yeah,
So
and D-Mase, and like, it as a receiver. Like, it's very clear sometimes as a receiver. Like, you're like, hey, that guy's really good, but his quarterback stinks. And so, like, his numbers aren't as good as the guy that's just okay, but his quarterback's amazing, right? Like, you lived it as a receiver, playing with all the different quarterbacks that you played with, and then seeing guys that, were your contemporaries and what they did, right? Like,
exactly.
There's no question that happens. I would just say this, like, as look at the quarterbacks and the guys that you described. And I think with Richardson, it happened. His injury happened so early. Like, I don't think we know anything at all. Coming into the season, I think that most people believed that Houston was one of the 3 worst teams in football. And they're not. And so whether everybody got it wrong, or whether D'Amico Ryans is that good, or whether C.J. Stroud is that good, or whether Tank Dell is that good, like, who knows, right? But I think if we take a step back and we go, Robert Woods actually been better than he was last year, right? So, like, that's true.
Yeah,
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong on that one. And quickly before I pass it over to Willie, this Buffalo situation, will McDermott be the coach next year? Will they make a lot of changes next year if this team doesn't get into the playoffs? Because right now, listen, you can't put it all on Josh. I don't consider Josh elite, but I don't consider him like, the bottom of the barrel either. He's a good quarterback, but he does things that quarterbacks with his experience shouldn't be doing at this time in their career. But if this thing doesn't get right, do you see a wholesale change in the coaching staff with Buffalo?
You know, I think the fact that they made a move at coordinator when I didn't think they needed one, I think that is a pretty good indication of, wait a second, like the head coach might be in trouble. And look, I think Sean McDermott is a really good coach. It sounds like I think that Josh Allen is a better quarterback than you maybe think that he is. And so I think that would be a really tough pill to swallow because they might go backwards before they go forwards. But like when you just look at what's happened in the AFC and teams that were supposed to be good, like it's very clear two underperforming teams would be Buffalo and the Los Angeles Chargers. And look, I think you could probably say another underperforming team would be the Raiders. They've already made a move. And so, yeah, I think there's at least a danger of a change happening there. Now, when you say wholesale, I don't think Josh is going anywhere because I think there are a ton of teams that would love to have him.
I was just I should have specified just the coaches.
Yeah, I think the coaching situation could be in trouble there, just like it'd be in trouble in some of those other situations. In Cleveland would be another one that obviously in trouble.
Tim Hasselbeck is with us, and Tim, with those underachieving teams you mentioned, then you throw in the Burrow situation. There's this huge opportunity in the AFC. And you got all these teams that are sort of in the middle. One of those teams that I thought fit kind of what you were saying about Houston is the Colts. They're sitting there at 6-5, and all of us are thinking, before the season, if you told me that Richardson is going to get hurt early, they'll be going with Gardner Minshew. 6-5 seemed like no way, but here they come to Nashville as a favorite against a team that's 4-0 in this stadium.
Yeah, I think that the surprise teams that are in the mix, obviously Indy, as you said, Houston for sure, and then the other one would be the Denver Broncos. I mean, those are the teams that I think really, really surprise teams, and Cleveland as well. So, Indy has done a good job. I think that, and I think we've talked about this throughout the year with so many quarterbacks getting hurt this year, and it feels like this many get hurt every year, but it feels like this happened by the halfway point of the season, where we're on the second, third, in some situations, fourth guy, for a lot of these football teams. Indianapolis, I feel like, protected itself because they got a guy that they had seen in the division that could play adequate football for sure. They were able to get, Jonathan Taylor, kind of back on board. That's mattered. And so I think they're hanging around, and I think that the fact that they're doing that is, probably speaks to the coaching job that's been done there.
Tim, you kind of referenced what I was going to ask you about next, and the Monday night game is first and foremost on everybody's mind. There, 12-10. You had a Patriots-Giants game, 10-7. There have been a number of these games, and my question for you was going to be: is it all just because of the quarterback situation, or are the defenses figuring some things out to make it tougher on offenses these days?
All right, so I would say this, and I know a lot of people have talked about this, and different blitzes, or I would say like something like I think some quarterback runs, which are kind of described as like +1 runs, like those are defended a little bit better than when they first started taking the league over. There have been some rule changes in terms of being able to cut block, which I think can impact run game stuff. I know quarterbacks have talked about, guys wearing different numbers and how it makes it difficult to identify fronts, in third down blitz packages because, it used to be very obvious of like linebacker numbers, secondary numbers. So like, I think each of those things, Willie, like is a little bit, but I would just say this, like the fact that we're seeing, Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle, the fact that we're seeing, Bailey Zappi and others, the fact that we're seeing, Kenny Pickett really struggle. We're seeing P.J. Walker and Jake Browning, and we're seeing, guys off the bench like that. We're seeing a backup in in Indy. We're seeing, the Titans go through quarterbacks. Aiden O'Connell is starting. I mean, run down the list. Run down the list in every single division. Tommy DeVito is playing. There is not a division where you're not seeing somebody that is either a rookie or way down the depth chart to start the season. Every single division. So, for me, I just think it's hard to sit back and say, these defenses are doing this when, every division has quarterback or more, has a quarterback or more where they just weren't ever planning on that guy being the guy. And listen, as one of those guys in my lifetime, there is a difference, okay? There is a difference between the starter and the backup.
No doubt about it. Tim, last one from me. I heard an interesting discussion on the MMQB podcast. Albert Breer was talking about specifically the Panthers going forward. And they've got the quarterback, and we just saw him, and he was making the case, how much would it have helped, basically, in hindsight, keeping Christian McCaffrey, keeping DJ Moore, who they traded. Obviously, maybe you could make the case they couldn't have both. Moore was part of the package to get them the top pick. But, the support system for the quarterback, he doesn't have much right now. And Bryce Young is – you've got to be really concerned. Whoever ends up with that job one is to try to surround him with some stuff. And I'm not sure what they got with all those – they don't have the first pick. Right. So to me, that's a really interesting question for the Titans in terms of Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins. They've obviously got to fix the offensive line, but supporting a young quarterback, that is something maybe I didn't think about as much when you have kind of a rebuild coming. You could maybe make a case, figure out a way to bring back Derrick Henry as just sort of a comfort zone for a young quarterback.
Look, I think that, and I would say this, and D-Mase kind of, alluded to this with the question he asked earlier, but I think building around the quarterback, you need to do it. It is so hard. Most teams never get their hands on somebody that it doesn't really matter who they play with. It doesn't happen. Look, Jalen Hurts got a lot better when A.J. Brown showed up, right? There's a reason that happens. Look, Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams better together than apart. So when you look at Brock Purdy having all the success, he's got great players around him, guys that would be stars other places. That helps a lot. So I really think that, as much as it is about getting the guy, you just need to make sure that he's enough, right? Because, the Titans aren't going to be able to necessarily go get, the next Lamar Jackson or the next Patrick Mahomes because he probably doesn't exist. So what you have to do is you say, all right, is the Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy, are we seeing enough of that in Will Levis? Because you can win with those guys if you get it right around them. I think that that's the case. Willie, I had a conversation with a guy, who's connected to a really good college quarterback, somebody that's, is going to play on Sundays. And he probably needs to develop as a passer, especially on stuff down the field. And he was talking about this guy leaving and going to another school. And basically the idea was go somewhere where there are good receivers, and guess what's going to happen? Hey, all of a sudden your deep ball accuracy improves. It's well, did it? Or did the guys you play with improve? And I think that most of the time it's the latter. It's the guys that you're playing with. And so I think that as long as you feel like you've got enough, then I think at that point you got to step on the gas and improving everything around you.
Last one for you, Tim. Tim Hasselbeck is with us. Your former colleague, Diana Rossini at The Athletic, put out a piece and wrote, Titans ownership is telling me that they believe that they have the right coach in place for future success in Mike Vrabel. And I don't think the Titans ownership would put that out there just for fun. I think that there's a reason for that. Why do you think Titans ownership wanted that out there? And do you think that that's the right decision?
Well, here's what I would say, just knowing my time working with Diana. I do feel like she was pretty well, for a national reporter, that she was pretty dialed into the Titans. It seemed to be she would oftentimes be first on a lot of Titans news in a and you guys know this, a very competitive industry, a lot of these insiders work in. So, look, there's part of me that thinks, listen, it maybe wasn't necessarily the desired timing of ownership. It could just be Diana being able to uncover the news or have the relationships. And then I would say that why would they want it? I think you would want it just because of all the different stuff. I'm sure you guys are seeing it, like, unless I'm from New England, like, it feels like every radio station at some point is mentioning, Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots together up in New England. Like, I do think that there maybe is an element of if there is some of that stuff going on and there were some type of trade that would happen, not with a player but with a coach, if that was possible, that like, hey, no, we like our guy. We want him here. So could be for the fan base, could be for trade reasons, could be for a lot of different things. And it also could be something that just was uncovered because of a close connection to the team.
Yeah, Diana absolutely does amazing work, and that is for certain one thing that we've been picking up on. New England media working overtime, putting the Mike Vrabel to the Patriots.
You guys
kind of
might be
nugget
getting
out
followed
there.
home. I'd be careful. You know what I mean? Like I would have put it past them up there.
Tim, can you answer one thing from your perspective here? Why in the world would it be worth the Patriots trading for Mike Vrabel or any coach for that matter when you would have to give up significant assets and they're in a full rebuild? They don't even have the quarterback now.
Yeah. Well, I think this. I think people believe that coaching matters for sure. I would use Andy Reid as the example of somebody, and obviously he wasn't traded, but like Andy Reid's an amazing coach. He got fired by the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, now they survived it obviously because of what happened after he left, but like, I think that if you can get your hands on somebody that you believe in and you know kind of what at their core they're all about, and if you feel like you need a fresh face, but maybe not a completely different philosophy. Look, there are a lot of good memories from his time in New England, and I think there's a lot of respect, and so that would be my guess. Now, listen, it might be totally bogus. That also could be true, but listen, the way people in New England feel about Teddy Bruschi and Mike Vrabel and guys of that era, it's different. It's special, and understandably so.
And it should be. Quickly, tell your nephew do not transfer, okay? Do not jump in that portal. Have faith in Jonathan Smith, okay?
You feel good about it?
I feel good about it. If the quarterback comes from Oregon State, which I hope he does, we're going to need him. He needs to follow Coach right on over to East Lansing and tell your nephew, stay put. Okay?
I will say the quarterback job down the road at West End is open right now. They're looking for a vacancy right now, fill a vacancy.
Hey, the nephew, the current Michigan State commit, playing for the state championship tomorrow night, D-Mase. I know you'll be tuned into the live stream. Actually broke his nose last week.
Oh, no.
Surgery to play in the game.
Oh, that's the type of play. He's a Spartan right there. As soon as you said he broke his nose, but he's going to play this week, oh, yeah, he's a Spartan. He's a Spartan.
Hey, go green.
Go white.
He's got it now. He's got the drill.
Well, good luck to your nephew tomorrow night in the state championship, Tim. Appreciate you for joining us. We'll chat next week.
See you guys.
All right, appreciate it. Tim Hasselbeck, he is the very best and catching on.
Mm-hmm.
Go green.
Absolutely. Go white. Hey, you got it.
All right, we'll react to what Tim Hasselbeck had to say. Plus, we're going to take a quick football breather. We'll get into some hockey coming up next because the Titans are not on a heater. The Predators, however, the Predators very much so are on a heater. Plus, there's going to be a familiar face heading back to Nashville wearing some different colors at the end of the week. We'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We are brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
Hey, if you are looking for cash for the holidays, Loan Pronto, as we've been saying now for the last few weeks, has got you covered. It's not too late. Or if you want to be credit card debt-free for the new year, or you just need some cash to start a home improvement project, Loan Pronto has the Express Equity line of credit. They can get you thousands of dollars, whatever that number is, based on the amount of equity you have, and you can get it quick in as little as 5 days. And a lot of times, most of the time, as a matter of fact, you don't even need an appraisal. So this is a much more streamlined process, and you can get your financial motor running faster because of it. So all you have to do is call Loan Pronto and get the process started. 615-499-5780. And we're not talking about messing with your primary mortgage. We're talking about your home's equity. 615-499-5780 or go to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval.
This is good for us. You know, you give up a little bit of momentum, talk about it all the time, but then we were able to kind of shut the door a little bit, didn't give up a whole lot after that. Probably more than we would have liked to give up, but I think for the most part, we stayed within ourselves. And it's a good learning and growing experience for our group against a really good hockey team.
Line Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We're live out here at Pete and Terry's Tavern at Bridgestone Arena. Predators in action tonight at 7 o'clock. Pre-game coverage at 6 p.m. as the Predators take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. A little bit of news coming out yesterday afternoon. Former Predators head coach John Hynes has been hired by the Minnesota Wild. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm happy for John Hynes. I did not expect John Hynes to have such quick interest from around the NHL. I mean, he was one of the final two candidates in New York.
Yep.
Of course, Peter Laviolette, just a couple of former Predator head coaches going at it for the New York Rangers job. Peter Laviolette got the job. But pretty soon after John Hynes got fired by the Nashville Predators, he was of interest with the Rangers, now hired with the Wild. I did not expect it to be as quick of a turnaround for John Hynes. Happy for him and his family.
I'm very happy for him, and you guys know me. I have been trying over the years to, because I really think he got a bad rap here. I don't think people understood that he almost was a victim of his own success. The team was sort of reshuffling, retooling, and if you look back a couple years ago, they weren't supposed to make the playoffs a couple years ago. Like, he got a lot of votes for Coach of the Year. I think if you really look back on it, he overachieved as the coach of the Predators. He took over a team that was broken, that, we talked ad nauseum about the Duchesne, Johansson contract situations that they were trying to deal with. And you see now life after them. The vibe in the locker room, I think, is a lot better with what they did. Mm-hmm. But John Hynes had to manage through a lot of stuff with that and trying to get the most out of those guys. And I think the further you remove from it, I think you understand that he's a good coach. You look at his record, it's not that impressive. But if you look at the teams he's had to coach, going back in New Jersey and in Nashville, he's never really had a loaded roster. And that's the ironic thing about this. He's going into a tough situation for the Wild.
Is it a 7-game losing streak?
Yeah, they've really sunk. They've not hit expectations, and they're playing with $14.5 million off the top because of the buyouts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. So there weren't any more moves for Bill Guerin to make other than to change the coach. And he's taken over for a guy that won 63% of his games. Like, he had overachieved. And I don't think Bill Guerin wanted to fire the coach. But I think I'm happy for John Hynes because you hate to see a guy not get another chance, who I think is a good coach. But this is going to be interesting to see what he does. It's another.
Since the Wild, they're coming to Nashville on Thursday.
They come here on Thursday. And so it's another fun little plot twist in the Central with Johansson in Colorado. Scored a couple goals last night. He's having a pretty good year. Duchesne's having a pretty good year for a really good Stars team. Now you got John Hynes for the Wild. So some old friends are right in the backyard.
All my exes live in the Central Division.
That's how it goes. That's it. And, oh, by the way, you've got Sidney Crosby and the Penguins, speaking of old friends, coming in here tonight. That's going to be pretty spicy.
Well, Willie, why do you think there's like this heavy recycling in the world of hockey? Because, I mean, you get recycling in the NFL, but I think it gets to a point where I think owners want fresh faces, like guys that have never done it, like OCs, DCs, and they give them chances rather than going back to the same well again with some coaches. Why do you think, hockey chooses to go down that route of, recycling their coaches?
It's a good question. I do think it happens a lot more. I don't know. Is hockey different? I'd like to see some numbers.
That's what I'm
Is hockey
wondering,
different than the NBA or Major League Baseball in that respect? Like Joe Torre was a failed manager for the Cardinals and the Braves, and then he gets the Yankees job, and all the Yankees were, why would you recycle this guy? And Joe Torre had never played for the Yankees, so it's not like he had that going for him. Turned out to be the right guy at the right time, and he won 3 World Series in a row, or 4 in 5 years. So when it works, you're like, isn't that brilliant that you brought the guy back? Bruce Bochy, right? Now he had a lot of accolades, right? So you could see why you would want to bring somebody like that back. But there are quote, recycled coaches that haven't won a championship that seem to get another chance here or there. And a lot of people are like, well, what about the up-and-coming guy? So the connection with the Wild for John Hines is that the general manager, Bill Guerin, spent a long time. He won a Stanley Cup as a player for the Penguins with Hal Gill, 2009, and Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, all those guys tonight. Bill Guerin now is the general manager of the Wild. During that time, John Hines was an up-and-coming AHL coach for their AHL team, and he was winning big with that team. That's where he sort of got his start. And then you throw in another connection in there in a guy that spent some time here in Ray Shero, who was the GM of that team for Pittsburgh. So there are Pittsburgh ties to Guerin, and so there is a Guerin tie to John Hines. And they're both New England guys, too. There's always that connection. So networking is big, right? Who you feel comfortable with. Who's your network? That's why those guys, I think, get recycled that way. But I see the argument sometimes.
It's the same idea as the NFL coaching tree, or you see it in college football, the Saban tree. I just think in hockey, those trees are so much smaller. The pool of qualified candidates is probably so much smaller because in football, you got positional coaches and coordinators and front office people and scouts. In hockey, the pool is just so much smaller. We were talking about this at the break. Peter Laviolette is on his 6th stop in the NHL.
6 stops.
How many times have you seen an NFL head coach have 6 different stops?
That's
Usually
right.
by 2 or 3, you start to fizzle out. You
Yeah.
start to
Then you
maybe
become
be
a
in the
DC or an OC, and
or
that's
the
it.
Nick
Yeah.
Saban pool of recycled coaches, like the Butch Jones who just goes to get Nick Saban coffee in the morning.
I feel like some NBA, you could put together some NBA guys that have been close to that. But Peter Laviolette's got his thing going. Once you've won it, that also carries a lot of weight. Like he's taken 3 teams to the final, right? So there's the winning. That helps you recycle yourself. But he's got that reputation. Billy Martin used to be the guy in baseball the same way. He would surface many times with the Yankees over and over, but other teams too. You get a shot in the arm if you bring this guy in. There's that reputation.
Quickly, Willie, I want to ask you something, and it's not necessarily it's not about the Predators, but it is about hockey. Did you see the interview? What the Athletic wrote up, Rob Rossi, I believe that's how
Rossi, I think.
Rossi,
is how you say it. Yeah.
Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby. I saw this last week, and I meant to ask you that then, but Alex is saying he and Sidney, sort of saved hockey in a sense. Now we've seen it with basketball. Michael Jordan, that he single-handedly saved basketball because Magic and Bird was sort of exiting out. Kareem was already gone, so they were looking for that next guy, and Jordan ended up being a guy. And you can say he did basically save the NBA. Do you feel that way? Do you think Alex Ovechkin was right about those two?
I think it's an interesting thing for him to bring up. I think back when I was a kid, and I was living in an NBA market. Like I was in New York, so I was already watching the Knicks. I was interested in basketball and watching NBA. But most people would say back then, like remember Magic Johnson?
Yes.
The famous thing about his rookie year when they won the title is that the game wasn't televised live. It was on tape delay, which was crazy. You can imagine thinking that like the NBA final was not on live TV because it was a weeknight. And so Magic and Bird seemed to change that. And then by the time Jordan came in, it went to a whole nother level, 3 or 4 or 5 years later. The thing about Ovechkin and Crosby, it was right after the lockout. Remember, this is another thing that maybe a young fan has a hard time comprehending. They sat out an entire season. There was not one game played. The Predators had just made the playoffs for the first time. So this was year 6 of the Predators. Everybody's excited. We made it to the playoffs. This is great. This is good. The next year, they didn't play a single game in the league. So they had some rebuilding to do with the fan base. The game needed fixing. They got the salary cap, which is probably the only reason that Nashville made it as a market, because they were getting outspent by the big markets. They were never going to be able to compete with them, so they needed the system to change. So they kind of needed that lockout in some ways, but at the same time, they needed to rebuild with the fan bases, and exciting players like Ovechkin and Crosby coming into the league at that time, that helped a lot. that helped a lot. The whole league needed a shot in the arm, and those guys gave it to him. You know.
We'll continue the conversation coming up next because we got to touch on these Predators. They are red freaking hot on a 5-game winning streak on a heater. We'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason at Teddy's Tavern this Sunday from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. for our NFL pregame show. They'll break down the Titans' Week 13 matchup against the Colts and give you the latest updates before the game. Our NFL pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment and Beast Unleashed. We all know how stressful moving can be, but I'm here to tell you that it does not have to be stressful. Caroline Fenton here from my friends over at Black Tie Moving, and their trained and dedicated team at Black Tie Moving is there to ensure that they take the stress out of the process. And that is exactly how my experience with Black Tie Moving went when I moved with them over the summer. It was truly the easiest moving experience I had ever had. I actually had some family members in town helping me move, and one of my family members said, I actually moved 6 months ago, but I would like to move again, just because of how easy and simplified Black Tie Moving made that moving experience. I cannot recommend them enough. So visit blacktiemoving.com, or you can call 615-437-8401. That is 615-437-8401. And be sure to mention the promo code GAME, G-A-M-E, to score 10% off of your next move. Then sit back and enjoy the best move of your life, because it was the best move of my life when I moved with Black Tie Moving. I'm Willy, D-Mase. We're live out here at Pete and Terry's Tavern at Bridgestone Arena because the Predators take on the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight. Puck drop at 7 o'clock. All of your pregame coverage here on 102.5 The Game starting at 6 p.m. And the Predators, ever since they, at one point they were 5-10, just could not seem to hold on to a lead where through 2 periods they could look like the better team and then they just give it up in the 3rd period. When Jared Stillman told Barry Trotz, I'm giving up on this team for the season, all of a sudden they turn things around. They beat the big bad Colorado Avalanche. They go on the road this past weekend, put up 8 goals against the St. Louis Blues, now on a 5-game winning streak. And we've talked about how critical this point in the season is, right around U.S. Thanksgiving, when you want to find yourself in at least a more advantageous playoff spot where you're not completely, you're not 10, 12 points out of the playoffs, where you can be knocking on the door. This is the time to start to kind of break away at the competition, start to see yourself rise in the rankings, and that's where we're seeing the Predators right now. Willy, from your perspective, what has that difference been?
I think confidence and being rewarded for – because I think when they were 5-10, I was looking at that team, and I was listening to what was coming out of the locker room and what the coaches were saying. Mm-hmm. They did not feel – it's not like they thought they should be 10-5, but they felt like their record should be better than it was, especially the losses, the last 2 losses, where they had 2-goal leads late in the 2nd period. And not only did they lose, they lost in regulation. So you don't even get the point. Points. So they're sitting there going, we have left a lot of points on the table. We're not this team. We are better than this. And now it's flipped. And this has happened in a short period of time. This was a 9-day span where they won 5 games. Mm-hmm. So it happened quick. So now the confidence is going. I think that they should be given a lot of credit for staying with it, not panicking. And that goes back to the leaders that they brought in. I cannot say enough about Ryan O'Reilly. We just went to St. Louis.
Yeah.
They showered him with praise that it's just it's authentic. It's authentic there.
Yeah.
And everywhere that we go where he's played before, like Colorado came in here. He played for Colorado for a while. They know he's had the effect, exactly what Barry Trotz has said. Same thing with Gus Nyquist. Now you're adding Luke Schenn in there. They got Ryan McDonough back from the injured list. He's another guy that has that presence that just calms everybody down and rubs off on the guys the right way. And so I think that's helped a lot. Now you're seeing other guys start to get involved. The young guys are playing a little bit better. Some of the role players are chipping in, like Yakov Trenin had 0 points.
Yeah.
0 goals, 0 assists before that Chicago game. He gets one to go in. Now he's a big reason why they've won 5 games in a row. So I don't think this is going to last forever, but it's a nice sign that they can be good. The other thing that's starting to happen, UC Saros is starting to look like UC Saros, and that's a good sign. And they'll need him tonight for sure when you're playing the Penguins.
I was talking to somebody today who is a casual observer of the Predators, not a diehard fan, but they said to me, man, UC Saros is absolutely killing it. I was like, if you said that to us maybe 2 weeks ago, that tone would be a lot different. But that is, we've talked about how this team has a tendency to sometimes win and lose as UC Saros is hot and cold. That team was losing when UC Saros wasn't being an absolute Superman. But now you're seeing the level of play rise, not just in net, but the team as a whole.
The other thing that's happening right now, Philip Forsberg is playing the best. This is, again, they call him the factor. And when they started saying the factor, it was like, okay, O'Reilly factor. I remember that. But it really, it's forget about the show. The context of, the old TV show that used to be called the O'Reilly Factor. Mm-hmm. He really is a factor. Ryan O'Reilly has had a great influence on Philip Forsberg, and Philip Forsberg is playing the best that I think I've seen him play with the complete game. Now, he's always been a little streaky. I don't know if he's going to keep up this production right now, but I think if you look at his game, where is he scoring the goals? It's not fancy outside shots. He's got that. But he is getting to the net. He's tipping pucks. He's making great passes. He's right in the same lockstep with his line mates. And that's another thing that seems obvious because we've seen Philip Forsberg forever. But I think around the league, people have watched him play. I think he's got another level to his game, and it's like, wow, this is what you signed up for when they re-upped with him, right? Because he didn't have a great year last year, and then he got hurt, and so it was kind of a lost year for him. So what were you going to see with a new guy? But I think he's really enjoying playing in this system, and he's really enjoyed playing with Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist. Those guys have great chemistry, the three of them.
Yeah, because it's not like they, on this 5-game winning streak, they're beating, bottom feeders.
No.
They're beating good teams.
Very good teams.
So what is it you believe? Is there one thing that you can pinpoint that in order to continue sort of this, and we know they're not going to win all their games moving forward. It'd be great if they did. But to find themselves in a position where they're on heaters more times than not, what is one or two things they need to continue to do?
I think keep developing the young players. Like they're doing this too without Cody Glass and Tommy Novak. So it's not like they're getting lucky with health. They've had their share of health issues. But I think the key is, like another, for example, we talked about Phil Tomasino. He was getting healthy scratched a lot. He didn't score the other night or get a point. He played a really good game against the Jets. And that's another guy. Chris Mason shared with me today this conversation he had with him, and we're going to talk about this on our broadcast. But he said, I've been working with O'Reilly. I've been watching what he does. I've been talking to him about how he's getting done, what he gets done. And now I'm trying to follow in those footsteps. That's got to be music to Andrew Burnett and Barry Trotz's ears.
That was the plan.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
That's why I brought these guys in.
What is the plan, Willie?
That's the plan. And so that's going to be important now. Can Tomasino continue to grow in his role? Evangelista, healthy scratch for a game, bounce back with a couple of really good games. Parson is another guy. He's playing huge minutes tonight. Who are the centers for the Penguins? You got two Hall of Famers. You got Sidney Crosby on one line, Evgeny Malkin on the other. So Juuso Parson is going to go up against them a lot. What's he got?
Welcome to the NHL.
Exactly. So how can he grow? So that's, I think, the key to continuing along this plane and keep getting better.
The Preds have been so much fun to watch recently, and it was also a very fun weekend of college football.
Woo!
Rivalry weekend, the Iron Bowl delivered. I saw Clark Lee get to a shade of red that I had never seen before. That was a blast. We had a tight Washington State game. Rivalry weekend absolutely delivered. So Mitch Light, who covers college football for The Athletic, will join us coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And make your silly underdog picks for your chance to win weekly prizes. You can play at theGameNashville.com or the 102.5 The Game app. Silly underdog picks presented by Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, and The Game Nashville app. We are live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Game Studios, which today is Pete and Terry's Tavern at Bridgestone Arena. The Predators in action tonight, 7 o'clock against the Pittsburgh Penguins. What a wild weekend of college football. We had the Iron Bowl come down to a 4th and 31. We had Washington State come down to a field goal where Michael Penix Jr. couldn't even watch it. We had Michigan, Ohio State, which that's all you really need to say with that matchup. And then, of course, to cap off the most dramatic day of the college football season, we had what I'm going to call affectionately Mark Stoopsgate. But joining us now to break it all down is Mitch Light of The Athletic. Mitch, appreciate you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving weekend. I want to start here with Texas A&M. It was reported that Mark Stoops was going to be the guy, and then, just kidding, never mind, a few hours later, it was Mark Stoops wanted to stay at Kentucky, Texas A&M went back to the drawing board, and then it was announced yesterday that Mike Elko, former defensive coordinator at Texas A&M and head coach at Duke, will be the head coach at Texas A&M. What did you make of all of that? What did you make of the potential hire of Mark Stoops and now the ultimate hire of Mike Elko?
Well, I think the Elko hire I like a lot. A&M, being that it's Texas A&M, could not do something without drama, so they ended up with a very sane, normal hire. But of course, the roundabout way they got to that route, with infighting and do we really want to hire Mark Stoops and all this, and you could argue. Now, I like Elko, but you could argue that Mark Stoops is just Elko with 10 more years of experience or whatever it is as a head coach. I mean, very similar kind of backgrounds, and they look, similar demeanor and all that stuff. But I really like Elko. I don't think it's, like, mandatory that you have experience at Texas A&M like he does, but I think it helps. That's a kind of a unique culture down there. He's recruited, he's recruited in Notre Dame. He's recruited at Duke, Wake Forest. He's an Ivy League guy, Jersey native. So, obviously he's got a lot going for him right there. So, I'm just really impressed with what Duke did. Everyone loves David Cutcliffe, but that program had fallen on really hard times when he got there. They were really bad the last couple of years, got good immediately, and I kind of applaud Texas A&M for not falling off the Elko bandwagon, even though Duke struggled down the stretch. Their quarterback got hurt, Riley Leonard. You could see why they weren't as good because his record's not great. I think they went 7-5 this year. So, again, long-winded answer, Caroline. I really like the hire. I think he's a good fit there, and he brings some normalcy to that program.
And by the way, yes, Mitch is from New Jersey, slipping that in there. I heard that.
Yes. And before we go on, I have something very important to ask Caroline.
Yes.
I need some guidance. I
Jaden
can't
Daniels.
disclose I can't disclose who my Heisman vote is. You're not allowed to do that. But do you have any suggestions, maybe? Who I should go for?
You know she already said it before you even...
Yeah, she already said it.
Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
I went on a diatribe this morning. I do a hit with Robbie and Rexford every morning on Tuesdays. I went on a diatribe of my campaign for Jaden Daniels. I mean, the stats aren't even close. Passing stats are close. The rushing stats completely set Jaden Daniels apart. He's gone against tougher defenses. LSU has the number one strength of schedule. Jaden Daniels has better stats against top 25 opponents. The only thing holding him back is the fact that Jaden Daniels can't play defense.
Well, maybe if he played defense, little Travis Hunter action, he'd have better shot. But I will.
He might be a better option than what LSU's gotten defensively.
I will take your suggestions under advisement as I move forward.
I will send you a
Thank
full report, and I will have that to your email by end of day.
Thank you very, very much. I will review it with my team.
Vanderbilt, Tennessee. I mean, I said earlier that I saw Clark Lee's face reach shades of red that I didn't even know were humanly possible, and I watch LSU and Brian Kelly every single week. It was the two back-to-back, calls that were blown dead, and then, of course, Tennessee players, they're playing defense. Clark Lee gets angry. He gets frustrated. What was a first down then turned into, a 3rd and 39. What did you make of that situation from, just a college football perspective and also from a Vanderbilt perspective?
Yeah, so a little caveat, I've told you guys, like my work Saturdays, sometimes I'm like sitting around doing nothing but watching games, and sometimes I have to work for like an hour. And this was a time when I was kind of busy. So like I had the game on. I definitely watched it, but I wasn't like honing in, like replaying. Could you hear the whistle and all that stuff? So, it looked, the first one looked pretty bad, the way A.J. Swann's demeanor, you can see when a quarterback has given up on a play, like there's a whistle. Like, I don't think you need to hear a whistle if you're a defensive player when you see a quarterback just and everyone stopped. So It's difficult not being there, and you know, because really it's loud and you can't really hear. So I understand Clark Lee's frustration 100%. I mean, the season they've had there, and then you think you know, as he said, he's trying to protect his guys. And I have been, you know, down on the sidelines when I was a sideline reporter for Vanderbilt for 7 years. So some good teams and some bad teams, and there's no doubt when you're having a bad season. And then you're losing a rivalry game like that, and you know you can't really exact revenge on the field because you're getting beat bad. There's frustrations that you know boil over, and you know the offensive linemen trying to protect their quarterback. So I'm not surprised it got to where it got after those two hits. Again, I'm not saying they were warranted or unwarranted. Just watching them, they seem unwarranted, but. It's just frustration. I don't think the officials did the best job possible of controlling the situation there. So, I applaud Clark Lee for defending his guys. I'm sure a lot of that was frustration and just a frustrating way for Vanderbilt's really disappointing season to end.
Now we got championship weekend coming up, and I think every game this weekend, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Iowa, Washington, Oregon, Florida State, Louisville, those games are going to be must-watches because obviously whoever loses, they end up out of the college football playoffs. Which team you believe is in the most danger? I believe it's Washington and Oregon, but Iowa is a good team. They're one of the best defenses in college football in regards to points. Does Michigan have anything to worry about with that one? But the way I'm looking at it, I think the one team is Washington and Oregon.
Yeah, the spread jumps out at you in that game, Derek. It's 9 points or whatever it was. Washington beats Oregon, about 6 weeks ago. But as I always say, we kind of make fun of the committee sometimes in some of their terms, but I'm kind of a fan of game control. Like, it's not just did you win your games? I know that's the ultimate goal, but how did you look doing so? And Washington, give them all the credit in the world. They have been playing with fire for multiple weeks now, and they almost got burned last week. I think they're better than TCU, but they're sort of like the TCU team of last year. They found ways to win. You look at TCU, they won by 7 points, 3 points, walk-off field goals at Baylor. You're like, they ultimately lost their championship game and still got in. And I think Washington's a better team, but there's a reason the line is 9 points. Oregon, if I'm talking game control, Oregon has been dominating every game. They've been maybe the most impressive team in the country since that Washington game there. So I'm really fascinated to see what happens here. Washington can kind of shut us all up because I think everyone's picking Oregon. I just love the winner-take-all part of that game. Now, if Washington loses, are there scenarios where they might have a shot? I guess. Obviously, if Oregon loses, they're done. But to your Michigan-Iowa, I would be shocked if Iowa was competitive in this game. They were a bad offensive team. They were healthy. Yeah, when they were healthy with Cade McNamara and Eric All, the tight end. The Deacon Hill, that quarterback, sure he's a nice guy, but he should not be playing quarterback in a league championship game. If you watch that Nebraska game, that was atrocious offensive football there. So, they might muck it up and make things difficult for Michigan, but I think this is going to be like a 21-3 type game. I'd be shocked if Iowa was competitive into the fourth quarter.
Now, is Georgia the only team that could theoretically lose and still make the college football playoff? I'm talking amongst the top 4 undefeated teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we assume because it's the SEC and Georgia, it's very difficult, but you sort of have to remove Georgia, 2-time defending national champs, and treat them for who they are this year. If you're comparing a one-loss Georgia team and a one-loss Washington team, I don't know that Georgia has a better resume than Washington. I think they're a better team. I think the middle of the middle of the Pac-12 is better than the middle of the SEC this year. And the Georgia's best wins are Missouri and Ole Miss at home. It's 2 very solid teams. So I think that would be really, really interesting if Georgia loses. I think they would get in. I think they'd get the benefit of the doubt, and it's very difficult. There's the human element of not removing the fact that they're the 2-time defending national champs, but that's what you have to do. I watched a decent amount of the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech's fine, solid, average team. They did not have much trouble moving the ball in Georgia. So it was sort of that Georgia team earlier in the year rearing its head where they're kind of messing around. They weren't dominating like we'd seen them do in the previous month.
That's a really interesting point. So do we think if Alabama wins, it's automatic that they're in?
I do. I think the SEC champ. You mean if Alabama wins, automatically Alabama's in?
Yeah.
Or yes, I would think the SEC champ would they win over Georgia. Now I'm just sitting here telling you how I don't think Georgia's like the best team in the history of the world, but a win over Georgia with what they have done. I'm looking at their resume. You can make the same arguments about lack of quality wins. They did lose to Texas at home. I think I'm sure you guys have been talking about it all week. We've talked about it. The committee looks. There are more scenarios this year where the committee has to make very difficult decisions.
Yes.
If we're looking at this honestly, there have not been very many difficult decisions in the 10 years or whatever it was. The first year was very tough, when TCU and Baylor got left out. But last year, Ohio State made it basically because there weren't enough good teams. And TCU was like a 3 seed, and they lost their conference championship game. So there's a committee. There's 13 people, I believe. It's not one person. Sometimes we think it's just, they say this team's better. Well, there could be 7-6. There could be a lot of discussion going on there. And it's, there's coaches in there. There's administrators. What do you value? Do you value game control? Like, do you dismiss Alabama's win against, not dismiss, but you say it doesn't matter. It's a rivalry game. They won in Auburn. Or do you look and say, hey, Auburn lost to New Mexico State the previous week. They only beat them by three on a miracle. This is not a great team. So there's so many different ways to look at these teams.
And along those lines, I think because of what you just said, Mitch, there's so many teams that have an argument. I wonder how each committee member feels about the value of the league championship as opposed to being on the outside looking in. Like Ohio State probably sitting there going, we've lost one game. It was at Michigan. It was right down to the last possession. It was a game that seesawed back and forth. It was a good game, but they're not in the championship game. But people have made it like that before.
Yes, we have. But I think last year they made it because there weren't other suitable teams. Like, I think they would take a conference champion. I see what you're saying. Ohio State, you could step back. Ohio State has one good win. They beat Penn State. And they had the opportunity and they lost to Michigan. So I think they're in a tough spot. One other thing, too, and, Texas is sitting out there. Texas might end up being the best team of the college football playoff era not to make it. And, you can do the whole Texas versus Alabama thing. Head-to-head is really only something you look at when two teams are considered even by the committee. I think Texas's problem is they're not going to be compared to Alabama because if Alabama wins, I think they might be the 2 seed behind Michigan or maybe the 3 seed. And Texas is going to be compared to maybe a Florida State. See what I'm getting? So, like, if they're comparing Texas and Alabama, then I think Texas they won in Tuscaloosa. But I think if Alabama's in the playoff, they will be ahead of Texas on the committee's food chain, so that head-to-head doesn't really come into play, if that makes sense.
Like you're saying, I think you get into this cycle of the group of teams as opposed to one team sitting there going, we've got one loss, Alabama's got one loss, we're a league champ, they're a league champ. We won there. We won. So that's going to get hairy if it gets to that. So along those lines, let's hit one more. How did you think Florida State looked in a rivalry game, a very motivated Florida team, hostile atmosphere? How did you think they looked without their quarterback?
Another great example. Let's say we're in the committee, Willie. I'm sitting there saying, you know what? They didn't have their quarterback. Florida's didn't have its quarterback. Florida's 5-7, and they barely won in the swamp. And then you're across the conference room table. You're saying, what are you talking about? You ever been to Gainesville? That's a rivalry game. You go down there with the quarterback making his first start of the year, all the pressure in the world. They fall behind, 12-0, come back and win. That showed so much guts. So, like, there's just different ways to answer the question. I am in the latter camp right now. Give them the benefit of the doubt because they did come back, because they did beat Florida at the Swamp, but they'll have an opportunity this week against Louisville. I think Louisville's actually a good barometer for them. Like, if we think Florida State is a legit college football playoff team, even with your backup quarterback, you go win that game by 10 points. Now, Louisville's solid, but they just lost to Kentucky, So if they struggle, then I think that opens the door. Now, I don't see many scenarios where undefeated Florida State does not make it, but I think the committee would either like to see them lose or win by 2 touchdowns and say they've proven that they can be a good team without them.
Yeah, so style points could come into play here this weekend.
Yeah, I totally think so, especially when you're comparing all these different scenarios. But we have not seen a situation like Florida State where a team has lost its quarterback with 2 games to go. People compare it to Ohio State, but Ohio State in 2014. But Cardell Jones came in the championship game and they won big, and they proved they were still a very good team without him. They've yet to prove that they're a very good team without Jordan Travis.
Now, what do you think of Michigan State's hire, Jonathan Smith? And do you believe that Ulunglele, I think I pronounced that right.
You're close.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
close.
close.
enough.
I'm in the ballpark.
I know who you're talking about.
That could have been.
I am in the ballpark with his name.
I'm giving him the award for the toughest
Yeah.
name for an announcer to call in the history of college football.
Ayamaleava is up there.
Yeah, that one is.
Okay,
too,
so he'll
You know how
make
you
his
pronounce
case
that?
in the coming years. Yes.
But
Pronounce that Nico. Yeah.
Ulunglele. Would it be smart for him to leave and go to State? Because I'm trying to figure out whether this is going to be a good marriage, knowing that the offense that they run is more of a pro-style offense, which is working for Oregon State so much so they've already won 8 games. But will that translate when he gets into the Big Ten, or does he need to open it up a little bit more?
Well, caveat, all coaching hires, we don't know. We think we know. But on paper, this is really solid. He's extremely well-respected, does more with less. They have not – I don't think they've signed a top 50 recruiting class since he's been there, and they've had top 20 teams. And we saw what the league was this year. So I think it was fortunate. Now, I'm not saying he would never leave Oregon State for Michigan State, but the fact that the Pac-12 is falling apart, you have an opportunity to get a guy who played quarterback at Oregon State. 2 years ago, if you asked an Oregon State fan, was Jonathan Smith going to leave us for Michigan State? You're crazy. But the circumstances have changed. So I think he is a really solid hire. He's obviously coming to a new part of the country. He is a Southern California native who's been in the Northwest. He was an offense coordinator at Boise State and Washington. I'm not the biggest DJU fan. I'm not saying they can do better. I think they can do better.
Well, the states that their quarterbacks are in the portal. Hauser jumped in the portal, so they're going to need some help.
Right, they will. And we'll find out, I guess, what Jonathan Smith thinks of DJU. We're not guaranteeing that he wants to go there, but if he wants his quarterback and he brings him along, then he probably said, you know what, I got a new system I'm bringing in. I want this security blanket of my new quarterback. A lot of my colleagues at The Athletic have told me this. He might be the most normal Power 5 college football coach. He's just a very normal dude in a profession with huge egos and guys who go, whatever. He just seems like a really down-to-earth, really solid guy. But Derek, I guess you don't really care. You want a guy who's going to win 10, 11 games, right?
All I know is this. If DJU comes to Michigan State, we're all going to have to practice saying it because Derek's going to be bringing this guy up every week.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the portal, Mitch, I know that's probably the biggest topic in college sports, right, is 2 things, the portal and NIL. Mm-hmm. And there's all this alarming numbers, the portal. There's too many people in the portal. There's people that never come out of the portal. Are we going to see, despite all that, a record number of people in the portal when it's all said and done? Like a new high? I feel like it's going that way.
Yeah. There's no evidence
no turning
yet,
back.
But there's no turning back. We're already seeing it, and it's every school. Every fan base like, our guys leaving the portal. What's with our coach? No, it's happening everywhere. And I think we are going to start to see a trend of coaches being – now everyone's going to utilize the portal to plug some holes. But I think the major portal teams taking 10, 15 guys, in my personal opinion, I think it's going to swing. The momentum's going to swing, or the pendulum's going to swing the other way a little bit, where programs are going to start to realize that high school recruiting actually is the foundation. That it's difficult. The quarterback is one thing, a wide receiver to plug in, but look at Colorado. It's very difficult to rebuild an offensive line. USC is a great example. They brought in some highly regarded offensive linemen, but their offensive line struggled all year. Their offensive line was really good last year because they had guys who had been in the program 3 or 4 years. This year, it struggled. It's very difficult at certain positions to have that continuity. So I actually think that we're going to see some teams start relying less on the portal, my personal opinion, but that doesn't mean it's going to slow down the amount of kids going into the portal because, everyone thinks their case is different. Everyone thinks got someone in their ear saying, you need to go there. And obviously we know the tampering And I'm not. There was a recruiting analyst who I respect. He does a really good job, but tweeted something out today about a certain quarterback saying who's not in the portal yet, saying I've been watching some film. This guy would be a really good fit at this school and this school. And I was just like, okay, we've got a national recruiting guy who's watching film of a guy who's not in the portal saying he's going to be a good fit at these two schools. Like, I don't blame the guy that's just doing his job, but, like, what are we doing here? The guy is, right. He's not even
It makes you
portal.
wonder, are those schools saying, hey, if you put this out there, maybe the guy, you just wonder what all goes on in that game behind the game.
Exactly. And, I mean, I'm not naive. I know that the tampering exists, and especially and I think one other thing I think we're going to see, like, the NIL trend of more schools getting wiser, the more NIL dollars are going to go to transfers even more. I think teams have realized that I'm not saying recruits aren't getting NIL, high school recruits getting promises and all that, but it's just like a much more sound investment to put it toward a guy who's at least proven he can play in college.
And if you're a quarterback, it's tough to not look at the recent history of the quarterbacks that have found the most success. I mean, look at the 3 leading Heisman contenders. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, all transferred. Last year, Caleb Williams, of course, he followed his coach, but transferred to USC, won the Heisman Trophy 2019. Joe Burrow transferred. Kyler Murray kind of transferred, but did transfer. Baker Mayfield transferred.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts transferred. It's almost like the recipe to success for quarterbacks is to transfer, but then you look at guys like Bryce Young, Carson Beck. I mean, Bryce Young won the Heisman, stuck around.
I
Carson
guess
Beck
Stetson
stuck
Bennett
around.
technically transferred.
Stetson
And they
Bennett.
came back.
Technically. But Mitch Light covers college football for The Athletic. Mitch, appreciate you as always. We'll chat next week.
All right, guys, take care.
Appreciate it. All right, coming up next, we will chat with Clark Lee. We'll get his thoughts on what he saw on the field in Neyland Stadium this past week and also the latest with the Vanderbilt Commodores football program. Clark Lee coming up next. Caroline Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Listen, our wonderful partners, Zen Sports, is excited to launch their new introductory promotion available to all new customers in Tennessee. The No Danger First Wager. When you sign up for a Zen Sports account, you will receive up to $1,000 No Danger First Wager. When you place your first bet on Zen Sports, you will be reimbursed for the amount of your bet if it loses up to $1,000. Plus, Zen Sports has launched a new VIP program for the premier bettors of Tennessee. If you think you might qualify, then listen up. Zen Sports is hosting a VIP tailgate and game experience on December 3rd from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. for the Titans versus Colts game. That means foods catered by a renowned chef, unlimited booze, and a private room for bet placing and mingling with other fellow VIPs. The VIP program is by invite only, people. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for VIP consideration, please check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. No other sport book will offer you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer support service and bigger and better action than Zen Sports. So what are you waiting for? Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. Zen Sports. Betting just got better. Gambling problems? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
That was a crazy, insane
Man.
ending to
Unbelievable.
the Iron Bowl on Saturday night.
Did you guys happen to see? There were some. I don't as a habit go on TikTok. I rely on my kids to send me the TikToks that are worth watching and other people. But there was an unbelievable one of the Auburn fans chanting, "Here we go, we got it, we got it, fourth down, we got it." And it went so quiet, so fast, and the literally jaws just dropping, and the phone staying on them for 5, 6, 7. I mean, it just said everything. It said everything about that play.
Tears, you saw
Yeah.
crying.
Oh. Yeah, CBS was showing it too.
Yeah.
They were showing people just bawling in the stands.
My little cousin is a sophomore at Auburn.
Oh my goodness.
And so I spent Thanksgiving with him, and he left. I was in Memphis visiting with family. He left on Friday so he could go back to Auburn, be there with all of his friends for the game. And it's, with 30 seconds left, and then Jalen Milroe gets called for the illegal forward pass penalty. So they get back. That was, 3rd and 20.
That
they get
was
backed
wild
up
in itself.
even further to fourth. It was 4th and goal at the 31.
At the 31, yeah.
I'm ready. I have my phone out, ready to FaceTime him. Because I knew he was going to be in the stadium
stands,
and cheering, and I wanted to see his reaction. And I'm about to pick up the phone and call him, and then I was like, oh, God, oh, no, end. And I'm thinking, oh, no, poor Harden. He went back to school to watch the game, and that's how it ends. It was a brutal ending. It was a gut punch, but it was one of the – I always talk about certain rivalries in college football that throw everything you know out about these two teams – throw the records away, throw the teams away, the talent away, and it's just anything crazy can happen. The kick six, the Iron Bowl is one of those rivalries every single year where Auburn just lost to New Mexico State. Alabama's going to the SEC championship to represent the SEC West, and it comes down to a 4th and 31. Absolutely insane. Yep. Another thing that's absolutely insane, if we can go outside of our local Nashville, Tennessee area. There have been some rumors around the NHL surrounding a certain Blackhawks player, Corey Perry. The Blackhawks just released a statement. I'll read the statement, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
From the Blackhawks statement. After an internal investigation, I can't help but laugh, the Chicago Blackhawks have determined that Corey Perry has engaged in conduct that is unacceptable and in violation, if you're watching the stream, I'm grinning like a 12-year-old, and in violation of both the terms of his standard player's contract and the Blackhawks' internal policies intended to promote professional and safe work environments. As such, Corey Perry has been placed on unconditional waivers. In the event Mr. Perry clears waivers, we intend to terminate his contract effective immediately.
Wow, what did he do?
Well, this has been the talk around the league since the mysterious scratching. He was a healthy scratch around Thanksgiving. I want to say maybe the day before Thanksgiving. So we're sitting there in St. Louis, and both the media for St. Louis and us were all asking each other, anybody know anything? Because, like, when Elliot Friedman and Pierre LeBrun and some of those people aren't getting any info, as Luke Richardson said, we're keeping it internal. In other words, I think everybody knew what was going on, but nobody wanted the story to get out. So they were on lockdown. So now fast forward several days later, and now you have he's not just going to be suspended or off the shelf for a while. He is done as a Blackhawk. So I'm not comfortable saying what the rumor is, but if you go online, you'll see what the rumor is. There were people that are staunchly denying that that's what it is.
Happened,
And so I'm not comfortable saying that maybe
you can find it. Go on the internet.
You'll find it.
But my thing is, shouldn't the Blackhawks then? Because they're leaving this sort of vague, but we know what the rumor is, but they're leaving it vague. My thing is, if you want to dispel the rumor, you say it wasn't, you come out and say this wasn't true what is being said. It's not true, like a Black Hawk. Like, this is not true. But if you're reading why they chose to release him, it would tend to think, well, something to that nature did happen. And y'all are choosing to part ways with him. instead of saying, okay, we're just going to suspend you for a few games. If it was something opposite of what's out there, we suspend you for a few games, bring you back in, and let it be that. Unless it was, something to the physical nature, like hurting someone physically, then it's like you got to go, or harassment, then, hey, listen, you got to go. But, I mean, people go read it for yourself.
The statement leads into the rumor. What the
yes,
rumor
exactly.
is.
It could match up. Let's just say it could match.
But
there could have been something I don't know. But
okay,
for Corey Perry is a decorated player,
and
right?
that's what I'm saying.
He is a villain on the ice. But you heard me when the Blackhawks were coming to Nashville, and Corey Perry, that ended up being one of the last games he'll play for the Blackhawks. But I asked Elliot Friedman about him. He said, you know what? Corey Perry is a villain on the ice. He stirs it up intentionally. But he said he's a good person off the ice. He's a guy you want to have on your team off the ice. Well, I don't know if that happened here. Yeah.
Okay, what I want to this is what
Some people might agree.
So if I'm trying to figure out how the way to put this. Okay. Does he have say if he wants to come back and say, no, you terminated me for bogus reasons. Do you think, based upon the rumor and based upon what they said, it matches from this standpoint, that he then can't come back as a player, go to the union and say, listen, they're wrong in this. They need to.
Because contracts are guaranteed.
Because if it happened, listen, even if it happened, again, people, go read the article. Even if it happened, the person isn't an employee with the team. It seems like everything grown up.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Everything's allegedly.
Yeah.
It was okayed by both parties, allegedly. How then can you fire or dismiss a guy and it had nothing to do, allegedly it had nothing to do with the team?
They cited, what did they say in the safe work environment
says
violation of your contract?
Engaged in conduct that is unacceptable and in violation of the terms of his standard player's contract and the Blackhawks' internal policies.
Okay. So, I mean, so they're doing this and intending to not pay him, whereas, of course...
He's going to have to fight it. If it is based on that rumor.
Or he can just accept it and say, look, I've played for a lot of teams, played for a long time. This is my first time ever having something like this go on. Does anybody else want to sign me?
I'm sure there's going to be another team out there that says, hey,
it's got to be some,
we're
it's
willing
not
to
like,
look past.
based upon the rumor, it's not like he's the first person that ever done that.
I feel like
you see what I'm saying?
I feel like that has probably in the history of sports.
Exactly, in the history of all sports.
Yeah. If that's what happened.
All sports, since sports has started, that hadn't happened before. You know.
Yeah.
And based off of maybe some concerns of some people here, it would imply that it is not completely out of left field.
Yeah. But I can see
keeping this
why,
as vague as possible.
I can see you wanting to trade him because now, because of what happened, these two guys don't get along in the locker room. Now I can say, okay,
I'd be pretty mad at him.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, okay, we got to release you, but that doesn't dissolve me from paying you your contract. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we got to get you out of this locker room because this
is not going to work.
It's not going to work. It's going to make the locker room even worse.
But that's different than terminating the contract and not paying them.
Absolutely.
So, when we get Elliot on Thursday, we're going to have some things to talk about because who knows what's.
We got some TTT.
And also remember the backdrop of the Blackhawks. Right, and the scandal that they had on an even more serious front than this is, but so conduct of people and stuff like that. It's a sensitive city for that,
absolutely,
for sure. So, oh man, I'm very curious on where the story goes from now because this just happened, right? They released a statement, so now all the reporters, and there are reporers in Chicago that are going to
they're chasing it down.
Yeah. And they're going to try to figure out what can we go with. Yeah. Oh, my.
Woo! Boy,
I always like to say, Why would you watch reality TV when you could be a sports fan?
Exactly.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. Let's wrap it up with some of your thoughts, your calls, and your texts.
By the way, Nashville at Chicago, December 5th. Okay.
Leave your moms at home.
Exactly.
This
Protect the dogs, protect your dads.
This Friday, Robbie and Rex Road will be broadcasting live for the grand opening of a new Dunkin' location in Franklin at 1441 New Highway 96 West. 1025 The Game will be on site from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Stop by and have your chance to win lots of great prizes. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. Want to wrap the show up with some of your phones. But before we get into your phones, just kind of joking around, but serious. Corey Perry has been released by the Chicago Blackhawks, and there are rumors surrounding what he did. Frank Saravalli, of course, a very dialed-in, very reputable NHL reporter, has come out and said vehemently that that is not true. And if it's not true, I want to know, what did he do?
Right, and so that's the reaction, right, to – and Frank Saravalli is definitely in the know. He's a good reporter for Daily Face-Off. His ties are to Philadelphia. But he said, this is sad that people are running with this. The problem is because the Blackhawks have not been able to or have chosen not to give any information, it's got everybody wondering, what did he do? Was it even worse than what was rumored out there? So this is one of those things. It just catches like wildfire. And he's on waivers, so in theory, anybody
can pick him
could
up.
put in a waiver claim and have Corey Perry on their team. So I'm sure they want to know what he did, because he might be useful for somebody.
But this is, because we were talking off air about, and we did mention a little bit on there, how does the PA factor in this? Because I think unless they have an agreement, all parties have an agreement, then I think it's almost, you have to take it to the PA as a player. You have to. I think the PA would approach you like, okay, what's going on? We need to, really seriously look into this, because as a representative of the PA, I can't allow one of the members to be dismissed from his job and then them not wanting to pay at all. So we need to find out what happened, and are you going to push? Because this is sort of like a trickle-down effect. If there's no agreement amongst all three and Corey Perry just decided to go about his business, what does that do to the next player?
Like your representation.
Yeah, it's like either be it right or wrong. You did it, you didn't. I still got to represent you.
Very looking forward to our weekly visit with Elliot Friedman on Thursday.
Man.
Your phones, everything is on the table. Predators, the Corey Pest in Hermitage texts in about the Greg Bedard report and his response, kind of our reaction to Greg Bedard's response on Jared's show yesterday. Wes in Hermitage says, I'd like to hear all three of your opinions. What's worse? A female reporter saying she makes up reports on live air so she doesn't look stupid, or a male reporter making up a report and publishing it and going on to a radio show to basically tell everybody that he has no facts supporting his own article? Because it's the same thing to me. I think lying is lying, and it's both bad, especially when you are viewed as a reputable source, as you're somebody that has connections to a team, a coach, whatever it might be, that the general public does not. Lying is lying.
I think in this business.
But I don't think that Greg Bedard
facts, then don't go with that portion of the story, because that portion, you could have read it. You didn't have to insert then, Rand Carthon, that whole thing with Rand Carthon. You could have left that out. Making up a report just so you can have something to say. I mean, in this business, you can't do that either way. You can't, But I think people look at, making up the report, just to have something to say, possibly a little bit more egregious than, what Bedard did, even though I think, hey, listen, if you ain't got nothing concrete or factual that you can, we ain't asking for your sources. We're just saying, give us some examples. If you can't give examples, then don't put it in there.
Yeah.
That's different from what
Chris Thompson.
Yeah, Krista Thompson did. I think that's a little bit different.
Yeah, I do
it's
think
still
they're
wrong.
separate categories. Yeah, both not great.
Exactly.
When you come to journalism. But I'm not sure this guy thinks he's lying. To me, he just sort of I think, exaggerated to fit a narrative to try to create this, and not really meaning to take a shot at Rand Carthon directly, but indirectly he did. But the narrative was like, how do I...
From a Patriots perspective.
Yeah, from a Patriots perspective.
But he should have known better.
You got to know. Yeah.
You
And I
can't-
don't think he realized as he was on that interview with Jared, I think he all of a sudden became very careful about what he was saying, and I don't think it really dawned on him
How much-
how bad it looked.
How much backpedaling
Yeah.
was done. Predators in action tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Stillman & Company's up next.
Beloved.